Okay, everybody, welcome to week 3. My brain's working a little slow right now because I hadn't eaten in a long time and I just ate right before this, so the sugar's it needs to be pumping through my veins very shortly, and then my brain will catch up eventually. But anyway, welcome to week 3. So Professor Irisari and I are diligently working through grading your week 2 presentation plan. So we're working through those. So thank you for those of you that have submitted those. We had quite a few students who haven't submitted them or had submitted them late. So just keep in mind, we'll talk about this. This will be the last week to talk about it, but keep in mind that weeks 3 and weeks 4, there's a lot of stuff happening, a lot of stuff going on. So just keep that in mind as you're kind of like planning out what you want to be doing this week and next week, that this is going to be really time consuming. So not falling behind is going to be really important. So for those of you that, if you're on today and you haven't submitted your 2.4 presentation plan assignment, get that in as soon as possible. So we can grade that, give you that feedback, and then you can get working on your week 3 assignments, okay? So here we go. Here's what week 3 looks like. You have your 3.2 learning activity. So same as we've seen before, your textbook reading, and then discuss the best visual element and or content that you've experienced in someone else's presentation. So it could be in a TED Talk that you watched, it could be in a presentation that you viewed live, it could be a presentation that you viewed online, like we were talking about before, like with TED Talks and those sorts of things. Let's see. Okay, yeah, so Professor Irisari is saying that she'll grade the 2.4s before she grades the 2.3, so you guys have feedback sooner. Gotcha. Okay, and then the 3.3 community discussion board, this is what Professor Irisari is going to go over with you all today, and then I'm going to go over, or she's going to go over both of the assignments for this week, and then I'm going to go over some visual element guidelines. So the 3.3 community discussion board, very similar to the discussion boards that we've seen throughout this month. The only difference this week is that this discussion board is open for week 3 and week 4, and Professor Irisari will talk more about why that is and how to utilize it and all of that fun stuff. And then the 3.4 brand yourself presentation. This is the first draft of your presentation. So this is essentially taking your presentation plan from week 2 and transforming that into your video presentation for week 3. Okay, and then that'll eventually turn into your final presentation after we do feedback and revisions and all of that as well. Okay, so there's kind of there's some growth happening there with the different types of feedback that you're going to be getting and how to implement that and revise your presentation. But like I said, Professor Irisari will go over that more in detail in just a couple of minutes. So I will send it over to you, Professor Irisari, and have you start by discussing the peer feedback discussion board. And like I said, it's open for 2 weeks. So, and we'll reiterate that many more times, but just as a reminder, just because it's a little bit different than the other ones that we've seen so far this month.
Okay, hello everyone. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, great. So we're going to go ahead and talk about this peer feedback discussion board, which it actually seems like we kind of talk about them in reverse because you need to complete at least one version of the first draft of the final assignment in order to post it to the peer feedback discussion board. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about how to use the peer feedback discussion board with your first draft, and then we're going to move on to talking about the first draft. So this resource that we have available to you for this week 3 peer feedback discussion board, as Professor Jarvis said, as she said, we'll keep saying it, but it will also be open to you in week 4. So the main goal for using this peer feedback discussion board is to post your first draft once you have it completed, and then get feedback from your classmates on the first draft, and also to give feedback to your classmates. So what you will be working on this week, the main thing that you'll be working on will be, of course, your first draft of the final project, which is very exciting. We've been building up to this the whole month. We've shared with you a playlist of some really awesome final projects. Those have been revised, so those have gone through the full process. Here you are just posting the first draft. So when you have your first draft, if your first draft is in the format of an MP4, then you can post that directly to the discussion board, or if you have posted it to YouTube, you can share with us a YouTube link, or if you've created it in Adobe Spark, you can share with us that Adobe Spark link. So if you're using Adobe Spark, an Adobe Spark link, or if you're using any other programs that you would like to create this video of your first draft, you can go ahead and share with us the links to the discussion board. And YouTube and Adobe Spark are really great equalizers. Everybody can click on those links. They can watch those links, whether it's on a cell phone, a tablet, a laptop, whatever devices they are using, so that they can then give you feedback, which is actually great because then you're getting a variety of different people giving you some feedback and a variety of different people looking over your work, not just Professor Jarvis and myself, and they can give you great pointers and tips as well. So a few questions that we want you to respond. So first of all, I should say that we want you to post your first draft to the discussion board and then respond by giving feedback to at least 2 of your classmates. So we're really looking for you to tell them what you liked most about their presentation, what did you think was really effective and why, and then it says what did you like least in the official directions, but I like to rephrase this as what are the areas or opportunities for improvement in their project. What's something that they could be doing maybe a little bit better? What's something that maybe isn't working quite so well? Is there an area where you have a hard time hearing them, or where their visuals aren't that high quality, or they don't look correct on your screen? Make sure that you're pointing those things out. And then what is one thing that you noticed in their presentation that you think they did so well that it's given you an idea of something that you can implement in your own presentation? So this discussion board, as I've said, it will remain open through week 4. It's a great opportunity to get feedback from your classmates, so you're not just getting feedback on these first drafts from Professor Jarvis and myself. And so keep that in mind as you post a discussion board. And we also realize that you're going to be working really hard this full week on these video assignment first drafts that you're required to create for the first draft assignment that we're going to talk about next. So it will be more common to see more posts on this discussion board later on in the week, closer to Thursday, Friday, Saturday, so that you'll see more activity on that discussion board there when your classmates have had time to do a lot of really great work on their first drafts, because we know those first drafts take a lot of time and energy and a lot of implementing the skills that we've been going over all semester so far for the first half of the semester. So Clayton is asking, are we posting the 2.3 or the writing from 2.4 to the discussion board? So that's a great question. So no, Clayton, you will not be posting the 2.3 or the writing from the 2.4 to the discussion board. This discussion board is meant to provide you feedback on your actual first draft that you're turning in this week, your first draft of the final project that we will be building up to. So you will be posting your actual video to the discussion board for your classmates to review and give you feedback on. And we're going to talk more about that first draft next. But if you guys have questions, definitely type those into the discussion board. You're welcome, Clayton. All right, Professor Jarvis, do you want to go ahead and advance the slide, and I'll talk a bit about feedback and giving feedback. So when we're discussing feedback, here at Full Sail, we have what is called the RISE model for giving feedback, which is a really effective model that moves us beyond that great job model of feedback that many of us have been taught to expect. And to start with, I really want to share just a little story with all of you relating to feedback, because I take faculty development classes to help me be a better educator. And I took a class recently, and I was really excited for the class on, of all things, rubrics, because creating rubrics can actually be quite difficult because we always want our rubrics to be fair. We want them to be specific. And I had created some new rubrics that I had worked really hard on, but I knew they weren't perfect. I knew they were still in progress. I knew I was still updating and making changes. So for part of the class, you were required to work on some new rubrics and then post those rubrics and receive feedback from your from your classmates, from other faculty members. And so when I was giving feedback to my classmates, I really tried to point out some different areas that I noticed, areas where maybe it was a little bit less clear than they would like, or make useful practical suggestions to them. But when I got my feedback, all I got was great job. And while I really appreciate that my classmates in that class thought that I had done a great job on these rubrics, I was really hoping for something more concrete or more specific. Since we're all here to learn, I had not these rubrics I knew were not perfect, and I really needed some feedback. And so saying great job when we could be providing someone with useful feedback is not always the most useful way to go. So this RISE model is a really good model to follow, especially if you're new at giving feedback to others, because we want to move past that great job and move on type of feedback. We want to be practical, we want to be useful, and we want to help our classmates out. So this model starts by being aligned with Bloom's taxonomy. So if you're familiar with Bloom's taxonomy, it really relates to that. So the first step is to reflect, which, as you can see in the picture, this is the bottom of the pyramid. So we're starting at the bottom and we're moving up. And so for this area, it asks you to reference a specific part of the project, and this is a good place to comment on an area that you like very specifically about what someone is doing well. So the next step is inquire. So this is a step where it's a good area to ask a thought-provoking question. So have you considered looking at this part of the project from a different perspective? Have you considered targeting this other audience as well? Have you thought about how this might be interpreted by others? These kinds of questions should be thought-provoking, and word them in a way that if someone was asking you this question, you wouldn't be able to give them just a one-word yes or no type of answer, that you'd really have to think about how you would respond. Then after the inquire step in the RISE model, we move to the suggest step. And this is where we would provide suggestions for improvement. Now, I know that this is difficult for many of us when we're talking about feedback. It can be really difficult to think, oh, I've worked so hard and I'm going to receive feedback. People are going to critique me. That's not the best way to look at this. The best way to look at this is that we're all here to learn, and Professor Jarvis and I, we want to teach you these skills. We want you to revise. We want you to get better. So in this suggest step, this is a good area to provide specific comments for improvement for your classmates. So maybe at 1 minute 30 seconds in your video, your audio cuts out for 5 seconds. So that's something you'd want to revise for the final project. Or I could hear something in the background at this point in your video. Or I really liked your images, but this one image of X, Y, and Z was unfortunately a little bit less clear than, and I couldn't really tell what it was on my computer. And these kinds of practical suggestions can really go a long way. And then finally, the last step, which is always the goal, and is the hardest to achieve because it's at the top of the pyramid, is the elevate step. And this is an area where you could propose ideas for expansion, where you are giving someone suggestions for how to elevate this project beyond its current form, maybe ways that your classmates could use their project in the real world, how you could expand on a certain area of a project so that it could be used further in a different extension. So this RISE model, as we've said, it's really practical. It's really useful to use this not just for your classwork, but also when you're thinking about giving feedback to others in real life. It's not nice to just say great job and move on if you see some areas that you can point out to your classmates for revisions and suggestions and making things even better, because that's what we're all here for. And if anyone has any questions on this model, go ahead and type those into the discussion board. I see that I have a comment, and the comment says by McKay, I'm really glad you're talking about this because it can also apply to the discussion boards, because it's easily noticed that in the initial post, but later posts don't get a lot of engagement. I would like to switch it up who and what posts you can receive feedback on. Okay, McKay, that's absolutely a great comment. And this is really where I would encourage all of you to think about your classmates and also to go ahead and try to provide feedback to those classmates that you don't see have feedback on their assignments first. Part of what we see with discussion boards, and this is not just at Full Sail, this is at any college, any class you might take, including a faculty class, we do see more posts that tend to be posted closer to the deadline. So those that post first do tend to receive more feedback just because more people have the opportunity to take a look at their work. So I'm going to challenge all of you, encourage all of you to try to make sure that you're giving feedback to your other classmates who don't have that feedback yet first. So rather than one person getting a lot of feedback, let's try to spread it around to all of our classmates. Which leads me to the next thing we're going to be talking about, and that's how to receive feedback. And I really think that I have already started covering this as we talk about the RISE model, but it is a good idea, just for some reminders, to cultivate a growth mindset. The idea that we're here to grow, we're here to learn, and we're here to build on what we already know to become more educated and learn further skills. That's what we're all here for. The next is to take credit for your mistakes. So if you make a mistake, that's okay. We're all human. We all make mistakes. Even Professor Jarvis and I, we make mistakes and we fix them, we take credit for them, and we move on. Focusing on self-improvement, that's part of being in school, that's part of being an educator, that's part of learning. Learn from criticism, and again, sometimes I like to call criticism, we can call this areas for improvement, but it is a good way to learn. It can be hard to receive it, but we can think about it from a positive place rather than a critical place. That's the point of working so hard on a first draft, to get really good feedback so that you can make those great revisions for your final draft. And then next, to find lessons and inspiration in the success of others. And so many of the TED Talks you watched, the speakers were talking about what they have learned over long periods of time from trial and error. And then when we're giving feedback, it's important to create safety. So in this space, we are all encouraged to provide positive and effective feedback. But being positive does not mean that we aren't pointing out areas for improvement or things that people could do better, but we're pointing it out in positive ways. We should be specific, as we talked about with the RISE model. We should be immediate, and we do need to occasionally provide tough love when being very clear about what is working and what is not working, but that's all for the benefit of all of you and so that you can improve for the future. McKay, exactly. Positive doesn't mean fake. It means that you're staying positive, but you're keeping it real. So let's talk about this brand yourself presentation first draft, because this is your major assignment that you're working on this week that we have been building up to all semester so far. So your brand yourself presentation assignment, as you can see in the area on the screen by Professor Jarvis's mouse icon. The presentation plan that you completed last week that we're going to give you feedback on by the end of the day Thursday. For those of you that were able to submit it on time, you'll have feedback by the end of the day Thursday. That's the first step. Then this week, for week 3, is the first draft, and then next week you will be incorporating the feedback from us, your instructors, and also from your classmates into your final draft. So you are absolutely required to make revisions or you don't receive credit for the final presentation. But in a way, you can look at that as a weight being lifted off of your shoulders because you are submitting a first draft. And that means that you will have to revise, you will have to improve it, but we know that we need that feedback in order to create better presentations. So as you create your first draft, you will be using that target audience that you chose and directing the presentation at them. So Professor Jarvis and me Professor Irisari, we are not your audience. Your audience is the target audience that you identified and researched for your presentation plan. So you will be speaking directly to them, and you will be projecting into the future. So this is your future self, projecting forward towards when you have already graduated from Full Sail, what you have achieved, what you've accomplished, the classes you've taken, what you've done that have helped you to be the perfect fit for this target audience, so that hopefully they will hire you or they will use your business. So in this project, you are going to be using the skills that you've learned throughout the month, as well as examples that we've provided in the final draft playlist of excellent final projects. But remember, those were all first drafts at 1.2. So you are going to be using a tool that allows you to create a video, and you are required to have visual elements and a recorded oral or verbal presentation. So some of the programs that you might use to create this project might be slide type programs like Keynote or PowerPoint or Prezi or Google Slides. You can also use Adobe Spark. There are a million different programs out there. Just as we've said for the other assignments here at Full Sail, we don't restrict the type of programs you can use to create an assignment, which is a really neat thing. But that final assignment does need to be in push to play, aka video format. So you don't want to submit a Keynote, PowerPoint, Prezi, or Google Slides project for your first draft. You want to convert it into a video. So if one of the ways that you can do this is by creating your slides in a program like Keynote or PowerPoint, and then using a screen recorder like Screencast-O-Matic or iSpring 9 to record your voice over the slides and make it into a really professional type video. So when you submit this project, it should be in the format of an MP4 file or a video that you have uploaded to YouTube and then provided us the link, because if you upload it to YouTube, as I highly suggest, we can absolutely view your project with a YouTube link. If you do use Adobe Spark, we do require that you actually download that Adobe Spark file and then attach the file to the discussion board. You can provide us with the Adobe Spark link as well, but we need to see that first draft uploaded and saved to the assignment, so that we have a copy of your first draft and that we can refer back to it when we grade your final draft. You want to make sure that your presentation contains 3 to 4 minutes, that you are narrating over the whole project, and that you are showing us visuals throughout the whole project. You do have the option of using a background music or short video clips throughout your presentation, but your whole presentation for this Brand Yourself first draft can't be a video of you. It does have to incorporate the visual elements and the oral presentation. It also can't be 3 to 4 minutes of video gameplay recorded on a screen with you narrating over it. So we do need you to create some really excellent visual elements that Professor Jarvis is going to give you some excellent tips in just a minute, talking all about what visuals you can use for this project and what are really effective. But you can't just have one running video of you or video clip from a movie or video of video gameplay in the first draft. You do need a combination of visuals and your audio. Okay, so if you have any questions about this first draft, go ahead and type those into the discussion into the chat box, because we are going to be happy to answer those while you're here live with us. Or if you're watching later, you can always send us a message and we're happy to answer your questions. I am going to go ahead and hand this over to Professor Jarvis so that she can talk to you about effective visuals for this project.
Okay, awesome. I was just gonna, right before I started speaking, I was like, oh, I'm muted. I had to remember to unmute myself. Nothing worse than talking to absolutely no one on the other end. So just one more thing I wanted to say, kind of just reiterate something that Professor Irisari said because we get questions about it quite a bit. So for the week 3 discussion board, just know that, remember your initial post is the first draft of your presentation. Well, most students don't finish their first draft until Saturday or Sunday of this week, so you probably won't see much activity on there until Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, when everyone has, had the time to complete their first draft. So don't get nervous if you go on there, between now and Friday and you see that no one else has posted. It's not an error. It just means that everyone's still working on their first draft, and you'll see much more activity at the end of this week and the beginning of next week, just as a quick reminder there. Okay, cool. So I'm going to go over some stuff about visual elements, visual aids, and then at the end we'll close with kind of this little checklist that we've come up with for your checklist of things to go through before you submit the first draft of your presentation. And then we'll close it out with any questions that you all have. So before I go into this, I want to we'll send out a link to this in our follow-up messages, but we highly recommend watching a YouTube video. It's also a TED Talk, but it's on YouTube, called Death by PowerPoint. It's a really, really great TED Talk to watch where the presenter talks about different types of, he talks about the 5 rules of visual aids, essentially. It's kind of, if you boil it down, that's what it is. But it's really interesting because he goes into like the psychology behind it and the way we as human beings learn and retain information and that sort of thing. So it's just really interesting. And he does it in an entertaining way. So I will get the link for that, and I can put it in this chat box. Or Professor Irisari could do that for me as well. So I'm not clicking around over here, but so we can put that in the chat box, and then we also will we'll also follow up with that as well. I should have been doing it while you were speaking, Professor Irisari, but I didn't. I apologize. So anyway, kind of starting us off with the visual element, talking about visual elements, is something I like to call my billboard rule. So I'd like for you guys to visualize you're driving down the highway and you see a billboard on the side of the road. So let's say it's like a major highway, so the speed limit's usually between like 60 and 70, right? So you've got a short amount of time to view that billboard, make sense of it, and figure out, does this apply to me or not, right? So you probably have like 2 to 3 seconds for your brain to do that whole process, to view it, read it, make sense of it, and then for your brain to be like, oh, that's applicable to me or it's not, and you kind of like forget about it, or you just keep going and that sort of thing. Or if it does apply to you, you'll retain the information, you'll remember it, you'll think about it, that sort of thing, right? So I want you to think about your presentation in the same way, and with your slides being the same way. I'd like for you guys to think about each one of your slides being like your own billboard. And that billboard needs to have one message on it and a limited amount of information. So I think especially with the early days of PowerPoint and kind of more traditional ways of, okay, Professor Irisari just put that link in there for Death by PowerPoint, awesome. So I think in the early days of PowerPoint and our more traditional ways of teaching public speaking and that sort of thing, we get into the habit of packing a lot of information on each one of our slides, where we are, how much information can I possibly fit on this one slide, and we kind of pack it in there. We recommend you doing the complete opposite. It's like, what's the smallest amount of information I can put on the slide? But what you want to do is stick with one idea. Because remember, your audience members are going to look at the slide, make sense of it, and then redirect their attention back onto you. Whether you're face-to-face or you're doing this in video format, doesn't really matter. The way that we do it in video format, what you want your audience members to do is view the visuals and then redirect their attention back onto your voice, to your audio narration. If in a face-to-face, like in a live situation, you would have like a projector screen or a TV screen or something like that, where your audience members would see your slides, but then they would need to redirect their attention back onto the individual who's speaking. Because as you will learn from that Death by PowerPoint presentation, you are the presentation. The presentation isn't your PowerPoint slides. You as an individual are the presentation. So it's important to kind of make that distinction and think about it in that way. So what I'd like to do is just run you through a quick guidelines for creating a visual presentation and just some things to think about as you're going through and doing this, because from what Professor Irisari and I have learned is that students either learn the wrong way to create a visual aid, or they just have never learned how to do it. So they're just kind of like figuring it out on their own, essentially, right? You're just kind of opening up PowerPoint and figuring out what to do, and following some tutorials or something along those lines. But you never learn the elements of creating a great visual aid. So we'll go over that today. That's what we're here to do. And in the chat box, Professor Irisari copied and pasted a bunch of really great links for free images. I know a lot of students struggle sometimes to find images that don't have watermarks on them or aren't copywritten and that sort of thing, which those are great resources to have in order to find high quality images, but also find images that aren't watermarked and all that fun stuff, because that can, we don't take points off for things like that, but it's so much nicer to have a presentation that doesn't have a bunch of watermarks on it or have a lot of like markups on it, or something that says like stock image across across it or something along those lines. Okay, so the first one here, of course, as you can see, the one on the slide on the left hand side is the bad slide, and the one on the right hand side is the good slide, or the acceptable versus not versus the one that breaks the rules kind of situation. So sorry, I set up, for those Mac users out there, I set up my corners to do different things, and sometimes I forget that, and then my screen just disappears. So that's why that does that. But it's useful in some situations to show my desktop that's why I set that up. Anyway, PC users out there are like, what in the heck are you talking about? Okay, so here is, I just opened up PowerPoint really quickly, and open that up. So how many, well, you can do it by commenting in the chat box if you would like. Marcus, Windows all day. Mac person until I die, I think. But that's okay. We can debate that all day. That's a whole nother situation happening. Anyway, my brother's he got his bachelor's degree in IT, and he went to a technical school, like a polytechnic college, and we argue about that all the time, Mac versus PC. So anyway, so how many of you out there, your first instinct when told to create a visual presentation is just go over here, open up PowerPoint or Google Docs or whatever you like to do, and you just choose one of these stock templates here? How many of you are guilty of doing that, right? We highly recommend against using now all the people are going to admit, and those of you that aren't admitting this, we just know that you're just staying quiet, because we've all been there. I've been there. I'm sure Professor Irisari has been there. We've all been there. So what we would like for you to do is pretend like these stock templates don't exist, and then always choose the blank presentation template. Well, it's not really a template, it's just the blank presentation, and then come in here and get rid of these boxes and start from complete scratch, blank slate, ready to go. The reason that we recommend that is for a couple of reasons. It allows for you to, like I said, start with a blank slate, build out what you want it to be. It doesn't tell you, you don't have to put a title here and an image here. It doesn't have to be a specific color. It can be what you want it to be, and that allows for you to make your presentation unique to you, essentially. Ravi's saying that I did that for my TED Talk assignment. A lot of students did, and that's okay. Don't worry about that. It's not like Professor Irisari, go back to your TED Talk and be like, this student used a template, we're going to take more points off. We don't do that. But yeah, no, a lot of students did that, and that's totally fine. So skip that stock template, start from scratch, and build out something that is uniquely yours, something that looks like you, something that is branded for you. With text, I know don't use more than 6 lines of text, and in the Death by PowerPoint, he goes over why this is and the psychology behind that. Or not really the psychology. It's not really psychology. It's just the way that we retain information, and that's fine as a rule of thumb. But we've seen really great presentations that use no text whatsoever. So presentations that are completely just image based or video based. Combination of the two, not just complete video, but a combination of the two, because like Professor Irisari said, your presentations can be completely slides. So you can have an entire slideshow presentation for this, or you can do a combination of video and slides. So you can do a combination of the two. We just don't want a presentation that's completely like video clips throughout the whole thing. So of course, this one on the left-hand side is very exaggerated, but just minimize the amount of text that you're using. If you are going to be using text, a couple of rules there. One, if you're going to be saying it out loud, it doesn't need to be on your slide as text and vice versa. And some students get really stuck in the fact that they think they need like a title on each slide. Like it'll say my inspirations, and then the next one says my job experience, and the next one says my college degrees, and then and that sort of thing. You don't need that on your slides. It's not useful because you're going to be saying that stuff out loud. You're going to be talking about your college degree. You're going to be talking about the internships that you had and that sort of thing. So it's totally not necessary. This goes along the same point of having the least amount of text possible. So you have thinking about bullet points and thinking about building out lists and that sort of thing. So thinking about, it says ditch the bullet points here, but thinking about a way that you could build out, let's say you wanted to build a list, build out a list of information without having bullet points, for example. So let me show you an example of this. So maybe let's say you want to talk about the different, you're certified in different Adobe softwares. So rather than having a list of like typing out Photoshop or InDesign and that sort of thing, how about using the icons instead? So use individual icons and have those be your have those act as your bullet points rather than having a written out list, or using just icons in general. So you could say game icons. This might bring up people. Oh no, it's not going to bring up people. Okay, so you could have different, the different consoles and different controllers and things like that. So things that are going to represent the list that you want to make, but are going to do it in a visual format, because as human beings, we see visuals faster than we read text, okay? And it's like milliseconds, I understand that, but it's milliseconds of energy that your audience members are saving, which in the long run after a presentation, it adds up to be quite a bit. Clayton's asking, is there any type of guidelines for how long a slide should be displayed while speaking, or is it just fluidity? So it does have a lot to do with fluidity, but it depends, because some students don't have a natural reference point for that. So what I recommend is, you don't want to slide for this video type of presentation, video format presentation. You don't want a slide to be on the screen for more than 7 to 10 seconds, because once that slide, that fluidity that you're talking about, it's not fluid any longer, it's not moving, it's too stagnant. So you want your slides to change every 7 to 10 seconds, or faster than that, that's fine, but I kind of give that general rule of 7 to 10 seconds, and not have an image stay on the slide for longer than that, okay? It adds movement, it adds excitement, it adds some interest to your presentation to have your slides change more often. Yeah, so McKay's saying that you will set that pace, and some people do set a pretty good pace, but then others, they have a slide on the screen for like 20, 30 seconds, and it's like, okay. Sometimes I feel like my screen might be frozen. I'm like, is the video frozen? What's happening? So that's just just something to think about there. Let's see. Yeah, exactly. Robbie's saying that if everything's written out on your slides, why are you even presenting it? Human beings, well, I'm not going to say human beings, but adults can read, right? So they don't need you to say it as well, essentially. Okay. Also, another kind of note with that, with the pacing of your information and how your slides are changing, make sure, some students do this as well, where they have some really upbeat, like EDM type music, and then their slides are like going at a snail's pace, or their voice is going at a snail's pace. So they have this like bumping EDM music in the background, and they're like you should choose me for this position because and it's like, oh my God, you gotta either one or the other needs to change. Either you need to pick up the pace of your voice or you need to change the music that you're using. And it has nothing to do with like, I'm not telling you to like change your personality and change the way that you speak. If you're more of like a chill person who speaks really slowly and is very, and some people are like that, then choose some background music that goes along with your personality and the way that you speak, tone of your voice, pace of your voice, that sort of thing. If you're like a more high energy person who, I get people in there and they're like their own hype man, where they're going through and they're like really high energy delivering their presentation, and that person's got some really fast paced music behind them, that makes total sense. But make sure that all of that stuff is matching up. Make sure, and this is for people who are using background music, of course, but make sure that the pace of your voice, the pace of your slides, and the pace of your music in the background are all on the same, I don't know a technical term for it, but are all on the same, like, all in the same pace. For those audio recording people out there, if there's like a word for that, let me know other than pace. That would be awesome. um, Frequency, that's a good one. Tempo is what I need. That's what I need. Frequency, tempo. Okay. That everything's going at the same tempo. Yes, tempo is the word that I wanted. Thank you, Ravi. So, yeah, so everything at the same tempo. And that, like I said, you don't have to change for someone who's like a low energy person. Like I'm not the type of person that if I'm making a presentation, you're gonna have like some house music in the background. Like that's not me. I'm more of like we're gonna have some like James Taylor in the background. Like that's me and I know that. So kind of know that about your own personality before you start adding background music to your presentation. Okay, so types of fonts. So some people are into typography. I think typography is really interesting, but this is just it's a typography thing. So using a sans serif font versus a serif font. So serif fonts have those little teeny feet at the bottom of them, and they help you read. So they help you read line by line. So when an instructor asks you to, when you write your essay, make it 12-point font Times New Roman. The reason that they want you to do it Times New Roman is because of those, it's a serif font, so it's got those little feet on the bottom. It helps them read from line to line. Sans serif fonts are more blocky fonts, as you can see here on the right-hand side, blockier fonts. They're easier to read from far away. They're higher contrast between the font and the background. And if you've ever seen like print advertising, big posters, billboards, stuff like that, they use sans serif fonts because they're easier to see from far away and they draw your attention in, higher contrast, that sort of thing. So that's important to remember if you're going to be adding text to your slides. So making sure that you size stuff appropriately. This goes with imagery, but it also goes with fonts as well. And especially for those of you that are doing these presentations on a cell phone or a tablet, it's a smaller screen, right? So you've got like I don't remember what the dimensions of an iPhone are, right? It's like 5 inches or 7 inches or whatever. But you're on a really small screen in comparison to what Professor Irisari and I are going to be watching these presentations on. Like I watch it either on my Mac, which is a 15-inch screen, or my external, it's not an external screen, but my additional screen, which is like a 22-inch screen. So I'm going to be blowing it up and watching it large. So making sure that you're sizing everything appropriately. So when we do watch it full screen, everything's going to make sense and be proportionate. And then make sure you maintain contrast as well with your any text that you're going to have on your slides. So using a dark background with a light text or vice versa, just making sure that everything doesn't blend together, much like this slide here on the left-hand side, which most of us could probably see that. But for example, my brother's colorblind, not 100% colorblind, but he would have a really hard time seeing that purple stacked on top of purple, stacked on top of purple. So you just want to keep that in mind. Make it as easy as possible for your audience to gather information. That's essentially your job. Your job as a presenter is make it as easy as possible for your audience members to get your message. If at the end of your presentation your audience members don't understand your message, that's on you, not on them, essentially. So that could be either in the way that you're delivering your presentation or in the way that you are like delivering it orally or delivering it visually. That's on you, right? This goes with it's a design thing, but no more than 5 colors. So staying to a color palette is really important, especially with the branding part of this as well. And this goes with images and with text as well. So as you can see throughout this presentation, I can go back up. As you can see, I'm just going to flip through the images that I've been using on the right-hand side. So that image, this image, this image, they're all either in black and white or they're like sepia toned in some way. So they're all kind of like the same style of photographs. You want to maintain that with yours as well. The types of images that you're using is going to be important. So I know a lot of you, especially with the gamers like to use these really vibrant pictures of like video games or pictures of characters within video games and that sort of thing. And so if you're going to use really vibrant pictures throughout your presentation, you don't want to like smack dab in the middle of your presentation have one in black and white, and then you come back with these like super vibrant pictures. You want it to be consistent throughout. Consistency is really, really important. Okay. 5 colors. So in this presentation here on the right hand side, with between backgrounds, fonts, and like the little decorative, I'm guessing you guys can see my cursor, the little decorative lines here and dividers and that sort of thing. It's we've used yellow, red, black, white, and gray. So those 5 colors are kind of the palette that we went with and built it out from there. You also want the colors that you choose to match the personality of the presentation as well. So I talked about before to have your background music match your personality and the personality of the presentation, but also the colors that you choose. So for someone who's going to be pitching a recording studio that focuses on heavy metal music, you probably don't want to be choosing like, well, not necessarily, but I mean, you wouldn't want to choose like pinks and purples and pastel colors. You might want to choose like grays and darker colors, reds, blacks, dark blue tones, that sort of thing. So just kind of having your the colors that you choose and the style that you choose to match your personality and the personality of what you're pitching as well. Same thing with contrasting. So our eyes are drawn to things that are different. So your eye is automatically drawn to the yellow text because throughout this entire presentation, I've used white text, right? And so your eyes are like, oh, something's different here. Something's important. I need to pay more attention to this, like that sort of thing. So that would be important. I know a lot of these, like not a lot of them, but some of these things are not going to apply specifically to the presentations in this course because I'm telling you not to use a lot of text. And with this particular presentation, a lot of text isn't necessary for this presentation, but you're going to be doing presentations outside of this class. I guarantee you do presentations outside of this class. In other classes, in your profession, I had a student the other day who's in like a nonprofit community organization. She does it as like not as a job, but as like a club that she's a part of essentially. And they give presentations every week in that environment. So this stuff is also useful for presentations outside of this class too. So just our eyes are drawn essentially to things that are different. Okay, so Marcus is saying, oh, that worked beautifully. See, it's like some witchcraft that I'm doing, telling you, our eyes are drawn to things that are different. You're like, oh, yes, they are. Like mesmerized by the screen, essentially. Professor Irisari and I say this on a semesterly basis. We say, it's so interesting how some of the things that we teach make sense in real life. We don't make this stuff up, guys. Like Professor Irisari and I don't just come up with stuff and say, hey, what can we teach him this week that's completely useless? We're like, hey, this is tried and true. We have a lot of experience with it. The research backs it up. Let's tell them about it. Like that's kind of the more of the conversation that we have essentially. So anyway, so this is one of the main issues that students run into. Yeah, that cat's cute, right? One of the main problems that students run into, and I've seen it less and less, so maybe it's becoming less of a trend, but layering multiple images on one slide, it's kind of one of those things. It's an absolute no-no. It breaks a couple of rules. One, we're breaking the template rule. We're using a templated background, and we're breaking the rule of more than one message on a slide. We're breaking the rule of proportions. So this whale is really tiny in comparison to this cat here. So a lot of rules are being broken. So what would you do instead? You would choose which one of these messages do you want to tell on this slide, essentially, and then you would make that, let's say we want to focus on this kitten, we would make him full screen. Get rid of the background, just make that cat be the center of focus on that slide. Or you could do something like the right-hand side where you've got it kind of like blocked out. You have your image, and then you have this black rectangle over here where you could put text or whatever, however you wanted to style that essentially, okay? So do not layer multiple images on top of one another. And yeah, if you're going to have an image on the screen, make it full screen or block it out like this one over here on the right-hand side, essentially. And then finally, last but not least, find a visual way, a graphic way, Either way, it could be used either way. Find a graphic way to deliver your information. And when I say graphic, I don't mean like R-rated. That's not what I meant by graphic. What I mean by graphic is a way of having your information come out in a way that's not in text format, right? Using graphics. So both of these slides say the same thing. They give the same message. 99.8 of California is experiencing severe drought, right? They tell the same message. But here on the right-hand side, and you can even get rid of this text at the bottom that of California, you can get rid of that. And that bar at the top is just for demonstrative purposes. But if you just had this image of the desert in the background with this circle graph in the middle, pie graph in the middle, that would be a great way to deliver that information. So 99.8% have that on the screen by itself, and then you come in and tell the audience, 99.8%, that's a huge percentage. Did you know that that's the percentage of California that's experiencing drought? That's almost 100% of the entire state that is experiencing drought. And then you can go on with your presentation, talk about that. So that's a way to deliver that information and make an impact. And like I said, this also applies to presentations mainly outside of the class, but I have students do this a lot where they're trying to persuade a group, or they're trying to just make a huge impact on the audience members that they want to make. So for example, they would have just the numbers 99.8 and just have that on the screen as like a big numbers, 99.8%. And then so the rest of the audience members are looking at it and kind of questioning, I wonder what 99.8% is. And then the speaker comes in and explains it. So it's impactful for that 2 seconds that you look at it and your brain is kind of going, I wonder what that means. And then you automatically focus your attention back on the speaker, and you no longer need to stare at the screen because there's nothing else, there's no other information to gather from that. I got the number, okay, tell me about it. And then the speaker tells you about it and you're like, I'm good. I don't need to focus on the screen. I don't have anything to read from, like all of that. So that sort of thing. Marcus, I don't think Marcus is asking me if that's true. I don't think that's true anymore. I'm pretty sure that California is having the opposite experience right now. I know that there's been like the snowpack is melting pretty, and they've had a lot of rain, but there's a lot of water happening now. So it's kind of like, because they went from they're having an El Nino year. Yeah, someone can fact check that for me, but they're having like an El Nino year. So or they are just coming out of El Nino, and then that means that there's more water happening last year. Yeah, okay. So yeah, so there's completely opposite now, but hence climate change, right? Climate change happening. Anyway, so those are the visual guidelines. Those are just the tip of the iceberg. Talking about, let's talk about climate change. Professor Erie, sorry, you should be so proud of me. I'm going to add in another climate change pun and talk about some just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to visual elements. Looking through slideology and doing your reading in slideology will also help with these guidelines and kind of supporting some of these guidelines and adding more in there too. And then taking in that resource of Death by PowerPoint as well, because I don't know about you, but I'm pretty sure I've died a few times while watching PowerPoints, died of boredom. So we'd like for you guys not to do that to your classmates and to myself or Professor Erie, sorry. So let's not have us die from boredom essentially while watching your PowerPoints, your presentations. And I don't think that's going to happen. Most of them are the live presentations, and some of them are from fellow faculty members at different places that I've gone to, conferences and things like that. Sometimes I watch these presentations, I'm thinking, oh, man, I wonder if do you like present like this for your students and things like that? It could be really boring. Clayton saying, never watch a military PowerPoint. Yes, I've heard that many times from a lot of my military students, and they're just like, they say that their commanding officers just break every rule when it comes to that, like military. So maybe we need to, Professor Irisari and I need to be contracted by the military to come in and teach individuals how to do presentations. We'll put that into the ether and see what happens essentially. So Professor Irisari covered this before about your growth mindset versus fixed mindset. This is so important when it comes to receiving feedback this week. So keep that in mind. Maintain your growth mindset because there's always room for improvement. That's so important. So important. So here's that checklist. I'm going to run through this checklist really quickly, and then we will do questions and answers. Well, you guys can give us questions, and we'll hopefully give you answers essentially. Okay, so here it goes. First off, 3 to 4 minute presentation. So keep your first draft of your presentation between 3 to 4 minutes in length. Of course, use PowerPoint pages, slides, whatever you feel comfortable with, just making sure that you are using slides. And if you want to include video, you can, but make sure there's slides in there too. The reason behind that is because it's one of your learning competencies is figuring out how to visually represent information. And so we need to see that done in slide format. Must be audio and visual. So please do not submit like a PowerPoint presentation with a separate script. We will ask you to redo it and submit it as a video. Limit the amount of text on your slides like I've been talking about for a little while now. Don't read from your slides, because if it's on your slides and you're reading from it, that means it doesn't need to be there. Get rid of it. It needs to be in a push to play format. So that just means it needs to be submitted as a video. And I know Professor Irizarry talked about this before. Some students like to upload it to YouTube and then submit a YouTube link. That's totally fine. If you use Adobe Spark spits out a URL for you that you can upload, or that you can copy and paste, and that's fine too. Or submit it as an MP4 file. That's usually what students do, is MP4 for the file extension. Use high quality full screen images. Make sure that resolution is high and the quality of those is high as well, so they're not really pixelated when we go to look at them. Include your own work if you had it. So those of you that produce your own music, sketch, animate, whatever creative things that you guys like to do, please include that within your presentation. We want to see it. I don't care how amateur it is, we want to see it. Submit the assignment on time, okay? 11:59 p.m. Eastern Standard Time this Sunday. Get peer feedback on the discussion board. So please submit your first draft to the discussion board and to the 3.4 assignment. Do it in both places. Sometimes we have students who are like, they get a 0 on their 3.4 and they're like, oh, well, I posted it to the discussion board. It's like, well, when Professor Irizarry and I go in, that's not the first place we go. When we go to grade, we go to the 3.4. So keep that in mind. There was one other thing I was going to say about this before Professor Irizarry talked about this before, but please do not submit a PowerPoint file. You can do this presentation in PowerPoint, but when you upload it, it needs to be in a video format. So different ways that you can do that. Adobe Spark, great way to do a video. You can do screen recording. Same things that you did with your 2.3 emotional storytelling, you can apply to this as well. Oh, that's what I was going to say. If you're going to include video of yourself, like if you're going to include you in front of the camera, looking beautiful and talking to your audience, a couple of things. One, please don't have any headsets on or I was going to say earphones, or like earbuds in or anything like that. Like remove all of that equipment from yourself. It's really distracting. And the other thing too is make sure that you have like a undistracted, I don't know how to say that, but eliminate distractions behind you. I've had students who like they're doing this presentation, it's so great, and behind them is like a pile of dirty laundry, or behind them is like kids playing in the background watching cartoons or whatever. Like please reduce the amount of distraction you have behind you. Try to be against like a solid colored wall, or do it in a place that it's going to be less visual distractions, okay? Oh, yes. Professor Irizarry is saying if you are going to, well, Professor Irizarry, I found a way to duplicate. So we'll give you two options on this one. If you're going to be using Adobe Spark, let me show you really quick, actually. Bear with us. I know we're going over on time, but if you could bear with us, that would be really awesome. Oh, I have it saved as I have it saved here. So hopefully it already, okay, yeah, I'm logged in. Okay, so here are all of my like projects. I have so many projects happening here. So if you're going to be submitting your presentation as an Adobe Spark, you can do one of two things. One, you can upload your file as a file to the assignment. So you'd have to export it from Adobe Spark as a video file, okay? The other option you can do is, for example, you can click on these little dots here, and then you can duplicate it. What we're trying to do here is Professor Irizarry and I need a copy of your original, and then we need a copy of your new one when it comes to week 4. So we need to be able to see both of them. What students have done in the past is they have their Adobe Spark video, and what they'll do is they'll have their first draft, and then they go into that same presentation and they update it with the revisions, and then they submit it again as their final draft. And that's okay. We want you to do the revisions and stuff like that, but then Professor Irisari can't go back and look at your old version because you've already edited the version that we looked at before. Hopefully that makes sense. So what we would like for you to do is have your first draft and your final draft be two separate URLs. And the way that you can do that is you take, let's say this is my first draft. Let's say this one's my first draft, and I'm going in and I'm like, oh, I'm going to fix this one. You just click on it, click duplicate, and it'll duplicate that. So then you have a copy of it, and then you can revise the copy. Hopefully that makes sense. Let me know if it doesn't. If we do Adobe Spark, how can we transmit that to a video? So what you can do is go to videos, start from scratch, video, blah, blah, blah. Video. Pick this one. Okay, so once you have compiled your, hold on, once you've created your video with your slides and all this fun stuff happening, a couple of things you can do. If you click share, it spits out a URL for you. If you click download, it downloads it to your computer as an MP4. Okay, so you'd want to download it, and then you would get like a hard copy of it, essentially, a virtual hard copy of it. If that makes sense. I don't know, guys. I don't know what else to call it. So we're gonna open up to questions. Here we go with the questions happening. Question number 1, why isn't Professor Jarvis's brain working today? There's a long explanation for that one. If you don't have any questions, you're free to go. If you do have questions or want to hang out for questions, you absolutely can do that. So that's what we will do now. Okay, Marcus. Marcus is an audio producer, and I'd like to include my work in my presentation. Should I just have music playing in the background, or should I make a slide solely focusing on it? So students either do it as music in the background and they comment on it. So they'll be like, you know, I've been producing music now for 5 years, and as you can hear in this presentation, this is my song or whatever. Another way that students do it is that during the part of their presentation where they're like highlighting their work, what they'll do is they'll say like, here's a song that I've been working on, blah blah blah, and they'll play like a clip of it, and then they'll be like, one other song I'd like to share with you is this, and they like play a clip of it. So you can do it either way. Have it playing throughout the background, or playing in the background throughout, or you can do clips of it. My recommendation for this one is, if you're going to have background music, it needs to be just instrumental. I don't want to hear lyrics in the background competing with what you're saying. So if you produce music that has lyrics, use the little clips of where you're letting them exclusively listen to it. If you have music that's just instrumental, then you can have that playing in the background. That's what I would recommend doing. Okay, let's see. So Alec, I'm reading your question, but it's a little bit confusing me. So just to be sure, with the talking music and all of that, do they need to be in it as talking and music, or can we just add music in the text with no talking? No, you have to be narrating this. So we need to hear you speaking throughout the entire presentation. Whether you add in background music or not, that's up to you. Not everyone does that. You can have background music, but yes, you have to be speaking throughout the entire presentation. Yes, exactly, Clayton, that you just summed up the 3.4 in one sentence. So Clayton said, to clarify, we are taking the 2.4 writing and transforming it into a video presentation. Absolutely. So Taylor, we've shared this throughout the month so far, but that's okay. We've had, let me show you. Oops, hold on. Let me get to it first. Yeah, okay, Professor Irisari just shared it. Here we come over here, and let's see, where are we? Final, did I scroll past it? Yes, CRP final presentations. This is the playlist that Professor Irisari just shared. This is a playlist of all final presentations. So if you need inspiration, want to know how other students have done it, formatted it, all that fun stuff, this is where you would go to look at that, and you can find, we have them for almost every program. Yes, so let me go back up. Claude is asking, can we upload the Adobe Spark video to YouTube for the first draft and then keep a duplicate for the future revisions once we get those critiques, edits? Yes, you can do that as well. So YouTube, since you'd be uploading it 2 different times to YouTube, that's fine because there'd be 2 separate URLs. So that's totally fine, Claude, if you want to do that. I'm cool with that. Ravi is sending out a link for good background music, so that's awesome. I actually might save that one myself because, oops, because I would like to start adding some background music to some of my videos that I do. Spice them up a little bit. So I'm going to steal that one. Okay, awesome. Thank you. Thanks, Claude. Have a good afternoon. Ooh. Okay. I just went to that Ben sound thing, so that's cool. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it. Yes. So Kiani, she's asking if including sketches, even though you're graphic design. Yeah, because a lot of graphic designers work from sketches, so that's totally fine. Marcus is asking, does it need to be 3 to 4 minutes? I mean, if you're going a little bit over, we're okay with that. Like if you're at 4 minutes and 10 seconds, it's like, that's fine, but we just don't want you going into 5, 6, 7, 14 minutes, like that sort of thing. I've had some students submit like 12-minute long presentations. And under those circumstances, yes, that does affect your grade essentially. How do you want references in this presentation? Like for images and stuff? No, Professor Erie, sorry, we can't hear you. Sorry, I just drank some water. So I'm trying to think of a way that you would need references. You wouldn't really need references for this presentation. The images and stuff like that, that's okay. I mean, you don't really need references for the presentation, essentially. Okay. Thank you to everyone who is signing out. Have a wonderful day, everybody. But you can always, we're here for a couple more minutes. Thanks, Nicholas. I'm glad these are helpful for you. Sometimes Professor Irisari and I don't know, so we appreciate when you guys tell us that. Feedback, right? Positive feedback. I actually had a student, while the questions are still coming in, I had a student who I talked about feedback in class. This actually happened last week. And I was talking about how important feedback is and getting feedback and applying it and like all this stuff, everything Professor Irisari was talking about. And then she was like, hey, can we give you feedback? And I was like, okay, well, I guess I'd be a hypocrite if I said no, right? So I said, yeah, sure. And then I braced myself for the feedback. And then she just told me, she's like, you had a typo in your presentation. So that wasn't too bad. It didn't bruise my ego too badly. It was just a typo. So, but it could have been something, really embarrassing. But I would have tried not to be embarrassed by it. But we all can work on accepting criticisms. I'm not the greatest at it. Okay. Give it about 1 more minute or so.
Professor Jarvis, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
So strange. I did nothing differently.
No.
Everyone I've been here, unfortunately, I've been muted, but that's okay. I'm back, and Professor Jarvis has been giving you some great feedback.
Thank you. Thank you for your positive feedback about my positive feedback. I appreciate it. Christopher is talking about time zone stuff. It's difficult because Professor Irisari and I don't see it the way that you guys see it when it comes to time zones because we're already in our time zone. So those of you that are outside of the Eastern Standard Time, from what we've been told is that the due dates are set to your personal time zone. So if you are looking at your times, if you're looking at your due dates in California, the due dates will reflect your time zone and make it so you submit them correctly in our time zone, essentially. Yeah. Well, welcome, Christopher. Thank you for joining us today. Hopefully you had fun in our live session. Yeah, so Christopher, it says you're an hour slower there in South Dakota. So your due dates should be 10:59 p.m. instead of 11:59 p.m., right? Or am I saying that backwards? No, you're slower, so you're behind us. So yours would be an hour different. Now I'm confused. Okay, so in Alaska it says by 9 p.m. So yeah, so that's what I was saying, is that it would set it for your time. Okay, 59 in the class. Now I'm confused. Okay, yeah, so you're saying, okay, got it. Okay. Time zones are extremely confusing. Thanks, Christopher. Have a great day. Thanks, Clayton. Have a good day. Okay, so everybody's well, not everyone, but a good percentage of everyone is signed off. So we're going to end it here. If you guys have additional questions, you can always send it to either myself or Professor Irisari, and we'd be happy to answer those questions for you. But good luck on the first drafts of your presentations. We would look forward to seeing them, and I know that you guys will have fun with them, with making them as well. Okay, so have a good day, and we will see you guys next week.